News Across the Galaxy presents the MidWeek Show. I'm your host, Bryant Lobos, and as usual, my co-host here with me, Mr. Edgar Zuniga. How you doing today, sir?
I'm all right, man. And as a show of courtesy to our guests today, our very special guest, I'm wearing a Minnesota Aurora kit. A lot of people are like, what? Minnesota Aurora? Didn't we just see those up in NorCal this week? No, that's a different kind of Aurora. Aurora Borealis. This time of the year? Here? It localized in your backyard? Yes. But no, this is a team in a women's league, UWSL, I think. But you guys should definitely check it out. They have really beautiful kits. But we're not here to talk about them. We're not here to talk about the kits. We're here to talk about another club that has amazing kits. But Bryant, can you introduce our guests?
Yes, all the way from the Twin Cities, David Sterling and Dave Stevens from the Loonacy podcast. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing? The Daves.
Doing well, actually. And to be fair, I actually live in Florida now, so we're spread out all over the place.
As loons ought to do, right? They do migrate, right?
They do.
That's perfect. Yeah. No, I'm thanks for having us. It's great to be here with you guys tonight. And I am in Minnesota, so at least one of us is representing the state tonight. But yeah, great to be here, and really thanks for having us.
Yeah, no problem. I know we gave you guys a couple questions, but I got one before getting to those. Let's talk about your podcast. When did it start? I was actually listening to you guys' last episode talking about the Atlanta game, but you guys do a beer review. So how did everything go about? How did you all come together and start this podcast?
So it started in 2018. The idea came about, I think, technically 2017, and it came about over probably having too much to drink. Tony, the one of the other co-hosts, he and I were at a birthday party, and we just hanging out. And Tony randomly suggested, "Hey, we should do a podcast about Minnesota United." And I was like, "Oh yeah." And then a couple weeks later, I don't remember, I texted him about it. I was like, "Yeah, we should do that," and he couldn't even remember what it was. So we got together, fittingly at a pub, and had some beers and talked about it. And yeah, that's kind of the thing. We thought we'd do a niche, talk about the Loons, focus on beer as well. And we made it specifically craft beer in Minnesota. It slowly kind of expanded to craft beer in the Loons region. We've included Wisconsin and North Dakota and South Dakota. And now that I live in Florida, we now include Florida craft beer. So that's Dave, you joined what, like a month in?
Yeah, it was about a month in. I remember clearly listening to the first podcast, and I said, "Wow, that sounds fun." It wasn't even something that was on my radar. I didn't think it was something I'd want to do or like to do, but I couldn't resist jumping on. I think it was probably the fourth episode, and back then you were doing it more like once every other week, depending.
Yeah,
maybe every week. And yeah, I think specifically, Tony, speaking for him, I think he got the idea from a Minnesota Twins podcast that I think it was Gleeman and the Geek, it's called, from John Bones. And they weren't doing it at breweries, I don't believe, at the time, but they would go to different like bars, establishments around the Twin Cities, and I don't think they were heavy into like, the craft beer at the time, but I think it was kind of a play off that, hey, we could go to different breweries. And that's how David and Tony started this, by going each week, or back then it was more like every other week, going to a different, actually recording in the brewery. And so that worked. That was a lot of fun, just going to the different breweries and featuring their specific beers. And then of course COVID hit, and that's when we started doing it kind of, at that time, almost strictly remotely on Zoom, and which allowed us to a little more flexibility. We could do it weekly, which is basically our format now. So
yeah, it's beautiful. And I see you guys have some drinks in your hands. What are you guys drinking?
Yeah,
go ahead, David.
I'm drinking Cigar City out of Tampa. It's a Maduro brown ale. I don't know if it gets that far west or not. It's up in Minnesota. They're relatively large. Probably they are the biggest brewery in Florida. But it's a great brewery. If you're ever in Tampa and you go to Ybor City, it's fantastic. name their beers aptly after things of Florida. This one's after a cigar, which makes complete sense. And yeah,
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
What about you, Dave?
And I've got a beer from Minnesota. And actually, if Twin Cities is a wonderful place, but I've actually got a beer from a brewery in Duluth, Minnesota. So if you do get the chance eventually to come up to Minnesota, I'm sure most people would probably recommend a trip up to Duluth, right on Lake Superior. Just a beautiful town. And the brewery is Bent Paddle. And actually, the specific one I'm having is called their 10-year anniversary Imperial Stout. Because this was actually released back in 2013, or 2023. So the brewery is 11 years old now. But Bent Paddle up downtown Duluth, just a beautiful brewery, and the beer is fantastic. It's actually, I told the story actually last night when we were recording our most recent podcast. It's one of the first beers that got me into craft beer in general. I've always liked beer, but it was mainly, whatever light beer you have, I'll take it. Didn't really care. And then, Bent Paddle was kind of started my dive into, trying different craft beers, specifically around the state of Minnesota. So worked out well.
It's interesting because I think Edgar likes those Imperial Stouts. He like those really dark.
Oh my God, yes. Give me an old Rasputin. I'm gonna just sit there and chill.
Oh yeah, it's a good beer.
This is a different one. I don't typically go with Imperial Stouts. In the winter, it's a great beer for a Minnesota winter, but this one in particular comes in at 9.2%, so it's a little stronger than I'd like on your normal daily drinker. So
that means we're going to be getting some nice, interesting answers towards the end of the show.
Let's see about that.
So, when we're talking about Minnesota, it's not one of the first places that pops up as far as like the history of the sport in this nation. A lot of people will talk about the Northwest with Seattle and Portland. They'll talk about St. Louis being the cradle of soccer. Kansas City was like, no, we're soccer city now. And of course, the East Coast, New Jersey, New York, and out here in Southern California. But I know that before Minnesota United, you had the Minnesota Thunder. We were talking about how the LA Galaxy came down there to play the Thunder at the Metrodome. But before the Thunder, there were the Minnesota Kicks from the North American Soccer League. And I was just curious to know if there's still any remnants of the Kicks or any kind of legacy that the Kicks left behind that people in Minnesota can still pick up on, or is that something that's been just cast aside and the focus has been from the Thunder to Minnesota United?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it's been cast aside because I moved to the Twin Cities in 2005, and I didn't even know who the Kicks were at that point. And you never really heard too much about them. It probably took, I don't know, maybe close to a decade before I really knew anything at all about the Kicks. So it's unfortunate because I do believe, especially with the history of the NASL and just with how that league was huge initially, it's pretty incredible how it's been kind of forgotten. Now, Minnesota United has tried to really tie in all that history, and they kind of use that as the reasoning for the term United. They say, we've got all this history from the Strikers to the Kicks to the Thunder to the Stars to the Loons and then to the Loons and MLS. We're trying to unite all of that history into one. And I think it's good. And honestly, I personally still don't know that much about the Kicks or at all the Strikers. But it's still cool to know that Minnesota, an unlikely place for soccer, has that history, and has that kind of foothold in the culture.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I think it was critical, but back in 1976, when the Kicks were established here to get into the old NASL, that was really huge. Kind of like when my family moved to Minnesota, it was back in 1990, but they professional soccer was non-existent at that point, and I think even in 1994, when the Thunder came back under Buzz Lagos, I think that was a big push. And if it wasn't for that history, if it wasn't for that history, starting with the Kicks back in '76, maybe that wouldn't have been possible. And so, like David, when I moved to Minnesota, soccer really wasn't under my radar. So, I think that 1994, when they did reestablish, professional soccer in Minnesota, at least I might have heard something about it. But because, other than that, you didn't see a lot, at least when I moved here, about professional soccer to any extent. You might see every once in a while, even now, you'll see like a retro T-shirt, a Kicks T-shirt, or a Thunder T-shirt, even just as kind of a retro. I've had a couple of those. I think they're great logos, great shirts. And I have, when I wore, I was never a Kicks fan per se, but when I would wear that Kicks shirt around town, I would be surprised that people would say, "Hey, I love the T-shirt." It's recognizable even now. But I think getting professional soccer, really getting into the mainstream, was probably difficult here because it had taken such a long break. And we are, in the Twin Cities, a 4-sport town, so to speak, with hockey, basketball, football, and baseball professional teams. So I think it was hard to kind of break down that barrier of entrance. And so, but I'd say we're fully doing that now for sure.
And it's a big leap to go from the little dude with, in the Kicks logo, right, to this very refined, immediately recognizable Loons logo that you have now, which to me is one of the better looking brands in all of MLS. The color schemes, just the way it looks, and the uniforms, which I'll bring up later on again.
Yeah.
But, go ahead, Bryant.
You actually, this is a side note. You guys mentioned that you guys are big into the other sports. How did the Nuggets come back on the Timberwolves?
Did you really have to bring that up? Boy, I don't know. Well,
because to be honest, this is probably the best series in the NBA right now. Those are really two good teams. And to see Minnesota be up 2-0 and then go home and then drop those two is kind of hard.
for all the victories to be away victories, it's unusual. It's unusual to say the least, and it's amazing in such a short term. I mean, if you're listening to sports radio here in the Twin Cities on Thursday and Friday afternoon, they were talking about this team, this Wolf team, as the best team since the '96 Bulls, and I'm not joking. I mean, everybody was just, Wolves in 4. They were chanting that, of course, at the end of the second game in Denver. Even the fans that made the trip or lived out there. And so you couldn't go from a higher high to now it's the sky is falling. They're doomed. They're done. And we have a painful history, at least recent history here in Minnesota. Our last, not counting the NBA and WNBA links. If you don't count that, there hasn't been another championship here in the city since the Twins won, last in 1991. So we are in a bit of a championship drought here. So
and it's looking good for the
win last year. By the way.
They did.
Yeah, they did.
Sorry, and the Aura. If we're talking at the top tier professional levels, so.
Well, let's get back to talking about some MLS. I would like to know the current state of footballing culture in the Twin Cities. I know you guys have the Dark Clouds. How did they get their name? And the other supporter groups. And then, of course, we all want to know how the Wonderwall came about. If you could please explain to us.
I'll let David start on that because he was technically a member of a supporters group here in Minnesota. So, yeah, David, if you want to start.
Yeah, the culture here is, I think like any supporters culture can get a little bit toxic at times. But I think overall, it's a very robust, really heartfelt, fanatical group of supporters that grace the Wonderwall every home game. Obviously the Dark Clouds are the most well known. They originate back from the Thunder. I still remember going to my first Thunder match at Blaine. Actually, I take that back. It was not at Blaine. I can't remember where it was. And seeing the group chanting, and every year the group seemed to get bigger and bigger, and they've always been the backbone of that supporters culture, and from them spawned more groups. I was a member of True North Elite, which is the second largest, I hope I'm still correct on that, supporters group. And they kind of just broke off from the Dark Clouds because they had a different idea of how they wanted to support the team. And, I don't think that either of them had a better way of doing it. I, for whatever reason, felt I resonated better with True North Elite. Since then, I mean, there have been multiple ones. There's the Bucket Hat Brigades. There's, the Red Moons. There's, I think there's like 3 others that I can't even remember. I can't even recall off the top of my head.
I can think of one that's a pretty good Twitter follow, the Opulunes.
Yes, yeah.
It's a good Twitter.
I think they do a great job. That they're passionate. They want the best for soccer in the Twin Cities. They're all about doing everything they can to advance the culture, and it's fantastic. I think I've never heard anyone come to a game and say, "Damn, I hate the chanting." It's like everyone seems to like that concept, even when it's completely foreign to them. So they've done a great job, and I think the culture is only growing and getting stronger.
So, Dave Stevens, can you tell us about Wonderwall? Because I remember, like I said, I'm a big football fan. I love sport. So when I first heard about it, I was just like, wow, that's fantastic. I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing. It's beautiful when teams develop their own unique culture, their own unique traditions. And I saw this as something that's very Minnesota, in my opinion. But would you explain to other people who are not familiar with the Wonderwall and the singing of the Wonderwall and how it all started?
Sure, of course. So I'm sure you guys know this, but for your listeners that don't, so the Wonderwall is also now the name of our supporters section in Allianz Field. And so, but as far as the whole Wonderwall, and it's just one of the best traditions in MLS, in my opinion. I'm biased, obviously, but yeah, the club will, they'll blast the Oasis song Wonderwall over the loudspeakers. The fans will then chant that and sing it. The music will cut out and the fans will sing the song. And one of my favorite parts about that is then the players will join hands and then kind of rush up to the supporters section and with a final celebration. And it's one of those things where you're in the stadium and you just, of course you want the team to win, but if they do win, it's worth sticking around for, and it's one of the best moments you'll experience. And I tell, I have a lot of friends that maybe aren't into soccer as much as me, and I say, you need to go there, you need to check it out. And ever since Allianz Field opened in 2019, it's just a wonderful experience that this state hadn't had in the longest time. I mean, even we're talking about the history, playing either at the National Sports Center or even in the Metrodome or the old Met Center. This kind of atmosphere of soccer specific stadium just didn't exist prior to 2019. So the atmosphere is unbelievable, and the feedback that I get from those friends and family that do go is they're just always blown away by the atmosphere. And you don't even have to enjoy soccer to get really soaked into it. And a large part of it is because of what David touched on with the supporter section and their chant and the atmosphere that they create. But so to answer your question, your other question is, yeah, basically it kind of had an organic growth, the whole Wonderwall and singing that song. And it actually started, I think, for the first time back in 2011, and it was the assistant coach Carl Craig at the time. I think it was just him kind of singing or humming or just having that song in his head, and then eventually whether he'd be on the pitch after the match or in the locker room, he'd start just kind of humming, singing the song along. And then it was throughout 2011 that the song kind of picked up some steam, and then some of the other players in the locker room, I think there's there's an old video. I think it was from 2011, but I think there was actually a video of this happening, of the team in the locker room singing this song together as a group in the locker room, and it was really a really touching moment. And it wasn't. I hadn't even seen that video until just a couple of years ago, I think. So really fantastic to see. And then I think what happened to make it blow up into what we know it as today is it was like the home leg of the soccer bowl, that the players and coaches actually serenaded the supporters, that evening, and sang the song to them. And so then going into 2012, it really became, what we know today. And I think then it was actually the Soccer Bowl in 2012 where the fans and the team joined together in singing that song. And ever since then, it just blew up. So
that's awesome.
That's
actually.
wonderful, man.
Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
In addition to that tradition, what are some other pregame traditions that Minnesota has? And it's it's a multi-layered question, but that's, like I said, it's a unique tradition, right? And one of the things that we like to learn about here is about some of the unique traditions that some of the clubs across MLS have. So let's talk about that one. But also, what is the environment like prior to a match? And if I was a visiting supporter, like what should I expect as I'm walking up to the stadium? And what am I going to see as I'm walking around? Or is there like tailgating outside, or is it more like internal?
So, Dave, you might have to respond to this because I've been away from it for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I can tell you one thing. We've always had this philosophy, and maybe this is a common phrase across MLS, but the drink 90 drink, where it's anyone from the opposing team is welcome to hang out with the supporters section, whether it's at a bar, supporters bar, or if they're grouped around the stadium, to hang out with them and have drinks and whatever, and just camaraderie. And then you have the 90 minutes of "we hate you," and then it's after that again. It's celebration, whether it's a draw, a win, or a loss. So that's always been something. But in terms of everything else, like I said, I've been separated from it for a couple of years now. So, Dave, what do you got?
Yeah, I'll add to that. Yeah, as far as your question, tailgating, there really isn't tailgating as you know it prior to a Minnesota United match. It's more or less because of where the stadium is located. The parking situation, unfortunately, is not the best around the stadium. Now, fortunately, it's right off of a light rail station, so getting to it is not difficult in that sense. As far as public transportation, it's great. It's literally in the midway point between Minneapolis and St. Paul, so it's in the Midway neighborhood, and it's called that because it's midway between the two cities. So it's easy to get to from public transportation, grabbing an Uber, but then that leads to a lack of tailgating. So I would say your pregame atmosphere is probably it's good. The one thing they do a little bit of, especially now that we're getting into the summer months, is they have what they call like the lawn in front of the stadium. It's a rather large, grassy area where they'll set up food trucks and vendors, and they'll set up stages to have, live music prior to the match. So you'll see a lot of that. It's very family friendly in that sense. Not so much the raucous tailgating that goes on there, but it's a good family friendly atmosphere. And then I know a lot of the fans and supporters that want to get down there early would probably be at one of the local craft breweries, actually. And there's many within just a walking distance, basically, of the stadium. So I think even David didn't. True North Elite used to get together at Dual Citizen Brewing, which is just a couple light rail stops away from the stadium. So that was kind of easy for them, and they'd start their march. They'd jump on the light rail from that brewery, and then, get off and then do the march into the stadium from there. So, following the supporters group can be fun, even if you're, say, on the lawn watching a match pregame. And and me personally, I guess my personal pregame experience is I like getting into the door as soon as I can. Usually the gates open an hour and a half before the match actually starts. And one of the nice features about Allianz Field, if you haven't been there before, is you can't quite see it behind David's head, but there's a brew hall. Yeah, it's a little far in that picture, but yeah, there's a brew hall that features just a ton of craft breweries, and it's basically the gathering space. Everybody kind of wants to gather there before a match. It's a wide open space. They've actually got if the weather isn't so great, you can anybody can go in there as long as you have a ticket to the game on match day, and just a great atmosphere just inside the stadium if you don't want to be at a craft brewery or out on the lawn somewhere. So
I actually saw a video walkthrough of the stadium where somebody mentioned that, because it just so happened it was a very cold day, and so he's like, yeah, I'm not gonna be outside the stadium much, I'm gonna walk inside. And this guy walked inside, and then he was there in this nice large space where it's overlooking the field, and he was like, I'm just gonna get myself a nice cold one and just relax before the game starts. And I was like, that's pretty cool. We kind of have something like that here in LA, but it's more of like during the matches, like you have to have special access to get up there. Although they've been opening it up after games, which is, I guess it's fine if you just want to, listen to some music and have a few drinks before you head home. But yeah, nothing like that. Nothing like that.
It is nice. I mean, because of course, I shouldn't say of course, but Minnesota does have, I think they call it the field club or stadium club, a couple different levels where you've got an all-inclusive food and beverage, inside part, and then you've got the stadium club, which is up another level, but it does include an indoor area. But those do require, more expensive tickets, obviously. But anyone with any ticket can go inside that brew hall because it is indoors for the cold match. So if you're too cold, you don't have to hide in the bathroom. You can actually be in the brew hall, which has big glass windows that overlook the pitch. So it is nice that they did that for fans, all fans.
Another question I had, maybe both of you can answer, is where's a good place like a visiting supporter can go and hang out before a game, like maybe a couple hours, 3 hours before a game, before, like you said, jumping on the rail and heading to the stadium? Where's like a place to see? Because you said it's in the midway point between St. Paul and Minneapolis. So let's say I want to grab a burger and a drink, or maybe just hang out with some of my friends before I head to the match. What's some of the places that visiting supporters can go and hang out?
Okay, well, I guess I could start. Yeah, like you said, Minneapolis or St. Paul, it's you're 15 minutes away by light rail, if that. So if you're in Minneapolis, probably the highest density restaurant, bar, club type area would be the Warehouse District, which is actually right by Target Field where the Minnesota Twins play. So it's quite a nice area. I guess that would be the North Loop now, probably even better. It's much newer. It was built basically around Target Field, and there's just countless restaurants, new bars, new restaurants. I guess it would be the hip place to be if you want to speak using those terms. It is quite nice. It's really beautiful. If you were in St. Paul, I would probably recommend Lower Town. It's an area of the city that is kind of, I guess it'd be the south or east part of the town. But again, great bars, great restaurants. It's right next to where the St. Paul Saints, the AAA affiliate of the Minnesota Twins, happen to have their stadium, which is also relatively new. So it's a great area. And then like one little spot that I kind of like is also on the light rail. It's right basically just minutes from where actually the Loons played their first 2 seasons at TCF Bank Stadium, where the Minnesota Golden Gophers play football. That was where the Loons started for their first 2 years while Allianz Field was being built. But if you're there, then there's a place called the Market at Malcolm Yards, which is a great it's an indoor space that has all sorts of different like restaurants, food vendors, and like I guess I'd call it a beer wall where you pour your own beer. There's multiple bars inside there, all sorts of things. And then plus the bonus, you're just minutes away from Surly Brewing Company. You can walk across the street to Surly Brewing. It's one of the most, speaking of craft breweries, that's one of Minnesota's first and most famous true craft breweries. And then you also have the O'Shaughnessy Distillery Company. So if you prefer spirits, There's that option for you. So that's a really nice underrated spot, I'd say. And then again, you just jump right on the light rail. 4 or 5 stops later, you're at Allianz Field. So it's really convenient in that sense.
Now you convince me to go to Minnesota. I take that trip.
Yeah.
Go ahead, David.
And if you want anything that's more ethnic, Spicy Feta is a really good Greek restaurant that's next to Dual Citizen Brewery, which is right on, again, two stops safe, down from Allianz. Then there's also the Dubliner, which is between there and Allianz Field. And yeah, there's actually a really good Ethiopian place right on Midway that the name escapes me. There's just a lot of great stuff, and that's not counting the breweries. If you don't want food and you just want to drink, I mean, there's probably 8 breweries right on that line that you can easily just get to the stadium from. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
So, guys, there's something we wanted to ask you because, as you guys can see, I'm a kit guy. I love kits. I have over 200 kits in my collection in my closet, which my wife says, like, geez, that's a lot of money. Well, I also every year for I guess the last 2 or 3 years, especially the last 2 years in earnest, I've been doing kit rankings, and I've been publishing the articles through our NAGn website. And I mentioned to you guys how last year I saw the Minnesota kit, the one that had the Aurora, and I said, yeah, it's not bad, but I feel like this jersey was better overall. And then this year, my God, you guys come back with, in my opinion, was the best kit in MLS this season. I ranked it number 1 overall. And it's a beautiful uniform. I think if you talk to a lot of people across the league, they'll say it's unique. It's something special about it. If you haven't seen it, look it up. The Starry Night kit. Fortunately, when I did the poll and I did the bracket, because it was number 1 seed, it got a bye in the first round, and then it just so happened you ran into LAFC, and other fans jumped on that, and is what they love to do. They like to be pretty loud online, and they beat Minnesota, and I was just like, damn, really? I mean, LAFC's kid's not that, there's not that bad. It's not fantastic either. I just felt like Minnesota's was a lot better, and so damn. But tell us about the reception that this kid got from fans, because like I said, I'm here in LA and I was like, damn, this is beautiful. I know Brian saw it, he was like, wow, it's a beautiful uniform.
Beautiful kit.
What were people in Minnesota, and I mean, you, David, you're in Florida, what were you thinking?
Full disclosure, I haven't bought it yet. But that's only because I'm very concerned of what my wife will say. So it's phenomenal. The first time I saw it, I was blown away, and I honestly, to this day, if I hadn't seen it on the pitch, I wouldn't believe that it's ours. I think, again, I can be biased. I can be a bit homerish here, but I think they killed it. Like, knocked it out of the park 1,000 times over. It's just really surprising, considering we've been, aside from the Northern Lights kit last year, we've been really let down often since our inception. And they kept telling us, oh yeah, it takes a few years for Adidas to get into the groove of doing something unique for teams. And yeah, they weren't joking. I mean, it's just incredible. I've shown some people down here the kit, and even people that aren't soccer fans think it's incredible. I haven't seen a negative comment about it at all anywhere.
No. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's something that we'd seen, I guess, more or less, maybe even last year you had a few negative comments, but overall, say if you're on Minnesota Twitter, Minnesota United Twitter, for years since 2017, when they got into the MLS, you'd see people complain about it more often than not. The jerseys, there was something always to complain about by somebody, but I I didn't spend days scrolling Twitter looking for a negative comment, but overwhelmingly huge positive support. People love it, and as well they should. It's just a beautiful kit, and the reception has been amazing. It's one of those. So I'm not a season ticket holder, to be fair, but the games that I've been to this year, it's probably, aside from maybe the first year in 2017, it's the most popular kit. I mean, you see so much of that Starry Night black kit throughout the stand. It's just wonderful. And I love what you do with your kit rankings, Edgar. And here's the question I would ask. So, and I've seen various posts about this as well. So if you did like a 2023 2024 kit ranking to include both kits, it's hard to argue that Minnesota isn't in the top 3, maybe top 2. I'm biased, of course, so I might say they have the best 2023 2024 combo with that Northern Lights kit and the Starry Nights kit. They're both just incredible compared to what we had. Disclosure, I haven't bought the kit yet either. I'm sure I will, because
oh no,
I love the black. I mean, I wanted a black kit, and I happen to be wearing one of my favorite kits. It is in the river kit just a few years ago now. But what was the one, David? Do you remember the name of that kit? That was the black kit prior. It was probably 4 years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago now.
It was gray with the black loon on it, right?
Yeah, it just didn't quite. I want it. I was craving up anyways, I guess. Well, if you never mind the name of it, but the first time they tried a black kit, it just didn't really, or a dark kit, real dark kit. It didn't appeal to me at all, quite frankly. I didn't really like it. But they knocked it out of the park. This is exactly what I was looking for. And I love the combination between the two kits that they alternate between primarily. So
yeah, and I think it's so Minnesotan because, there's a reason why the Aurora or the Aurora, Minnesota's known for the Northern Lights, to be able to see it, and at the same time, in the summer or in the winter, if you brave going outside, when you're out away from the city lights and you can look up at the sky and it's clear. I mean, it is crazy ass starry. It's everything about these two kits is very Minnesotan, and I think it really they did a great job of encapsulating what that is with both of these kits. But this Starry Night is it's fantastic.
Yeah, and we love it out here too. It's a beautiful kit, by the way. All right, boys, let's get into some club stuff. I actually listened to you guys' last episode. There were some things said about a certain player who's not there right now. But what is the current state of the club? Because you guys are doing more than fine this season without one Claudio Reynoso, who is
Emmanuel Reynoso,
who has been a player that we've been watching for a long time, and he's really, really good. I know he likes to be out in Argentina clubs and stuff like that since he's not signed with the club. But what has been the expectations without having him there? And Coach Ramsey and company have you guys playing marvelous for now. So what's been the secret sauce to that?
If you go back and listen to our season preview podcast, we were not in any way high on this team. I think it was reasonable. We didn't have a manager. Reynoso was injured. We weren't expecting a whole lot. But now, what are we? 12 games in? 11 games in? I can't remember.
Minnesota's 10 games played so far.
10 games. That's right. Yeah. I think 10 games in, we could not have asked for more. Our caretaker, Cameron Knowles, managed to pull off a miracle of pulling something out of the hat and keeping us on track. And then when Ramsey came in, he just continued on and has been a breath of fresh air for the team after years of Adrian Heath being really kind of robotic and predictable and unwilling to waver from his philosophy. It's been interesting, and the what he's gotten out of this squad without Emmanuel Reynoso has been nothing short of spectacular. The chemistry seems to be off the charts. They're working hard. They're putting in the effort that they need. They're making arguments to get starts like Tani, who's playing incredibly, and they're doing everything that you hope that they can do. And look, they're 2 points per game. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if I can, I'll add to that. I mean, it is pretty incredible. In fact, it's the best start that this club has had in their MLS existence since 2017, as far as a 10 game stretch to start the season. That 20 points is the highest this team has ever seen. And I think, yeah, there's 4 regular contributors on our podcast, and I think I was the only one that even had them inside the playoff line, prior to the season starting. But that's not surprising because they kind of finished the year last year very flat. I think they finished 11th. It just wasn't a good finish to the season, even with Emmanuel Reynoso coming back and playing the last 60% of the games. It just was a very uninspiring finish. Of course, Adrian Heath getting fired at the end of that season, and that David touched on it. That was a big problem. We came into the season without a head coach, and so with an injury, Reynoso, and so things were not looking great at all. So yeah, much to our surprise, this club just had a total different look, a total different feel, a total different energy. That wasn't, we'd kind of known it was going to look different, prior to the start of the season, but we just didn't know what to expect. So there was a lot of negativity. I even the national pundits, most of them had Minnesota well outside of the playoff line, and so yeah, just to get what we had, it was just a breath of fresh air. And I think this thing that surprised everybody is Minnesota has had 25 players, get minutes with the first team. I mean, that's a number that is blown out. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but 25 players seeing significant minutes in a game, that's not something we would have seen last year. We're seeing a youth movement here. It begins with David touched on it, Tani Oluwaseyi. He's been amazing. He's kind of come out of nowhere. And I shouldn't say that. He was on loan last year with San Antonio of the USL. I think he scored a record number of goals down there. And so he kind of lit it up down there. But he's come up to the first team here with Minnesota and continued where he left off with a successful loan last year. He's looked unbelievable. I think a lot of people kind of forgot that Minnesota had to play most of the year last year without Robin Lod. He got injured very early in the season last year, and so far he's on the MVP radar. Now, granted, we all know he probably won't win that award if things continue as they are in MLS in general. But he's on the radar. I think I saw an MLS soccer poll that he was kind of 5th. He is playing like a true MVP, and that's something we didn't have. He's been with this club for quite a few years now, but he's come out and playing as well as he ever has. And so I think people kind of forgot that he was coming back healthy, Robin Lod was, and he's just made a tremendous impact. And just the fact that we're seeing, Eric Ramsey, come in and take up, fortunately for Cameron Knowles, he had a tremendous start to the season. And now Eric Ramsey is just doing a lot of tinkering. We're seeing different lineups, different formations, on a game-to-game basis. I think in the last 3 wins for this club, we've seen them trot out a different formation and a different starting 11 in each of those matches, either due to injuries or absences, or, as the coach comes out and says, due to the opponent, maybe. So it's something we're kind of talking about here is, it's hard to even predict a starting 11 or even the formation that we'll see, say, even on Wednesday against the LA Galaxy. It's hard. It's really hard to predict right now. And that's exciting. We haven't seen that in years. So we're all surprised. I feel there is a little bit of, rather be lucky than good, especially in the first 5 matches of the season. Minnesota was relying on a lot of late results, whereas that kind of was the opposite for this club last year. We were on the wrong end of that, where maybe now we're getting, I don't know if we should call it luck, but that's just what's happening. we're over kind of where our expected goals are much lower than our actual goals scored to this point in the season. So there's, at least for me, there's a little bit of trepidation, but generally speaking, this club is doing fantastic, way better than pretty much everybody here expected.
So I hate to ask, but for some of our listeners who might not be aware of what's going on, there's the whole saga with Emmanuel Reynoso, who is from Argentina. He was when he's on, right? I mean, the guy he's a difference maker. But from what I've heard, he's gone AWOL. He's refused to go to his green card. His visa appointment. And every attempt the club has made to try to get him to come back, he's not showing interest in returning, right? And it seems like the club is ready. It has either moved on or they're ready to move on. Correct?
Well, so he showed up.
He's here. He's here. That was big news. It was big news that broke. It was big news that broke. I first saw it on Saturday. He was actually in Minnesota. There was pictures of him. He was at MUFC 2. He was at their match on Sunday up at the NSC in Blaine. And so he's here in Minnesota. Now, he won't be in the starting lineup against the Galaxy on Wednesday or anytime soon from what it sounds like. But yeah, it was huge news because I'll tell you what, it certainly felt we heard, we heard from the captain, Michael Boxall, earlier in the season. He publicly came out and basically, said, negative things towards what's happening. And we didn't hear that last year. We went through a similar ordeal where he was in Argentina for an extended period of time. We're replaying it. It's Groundhog's Day. We're seeing the same thing. So by this point, I'm pretty much, I was trying to hang on as long as I could, but most supporters were just done. They're ready to move on, and it doesn't help Reynoso and the feelings that maybe fans have towards him that Minnesota has been fine, so to speak, without him so far. But yeah, it was certainly huge news just this past weekend that he was back in Minnesota, and he. Basically, the way that Andy Greeter, he covers the Loons for the St. Paul Pioneer Press, and he basically stated that there's definitely a return to play. It's basically like he's coming back in the preseason. He's going to have to go through multiple steps, multiple stages. Probably not just with training, but he's probably going to have to publicly speak with his teammates and maybe even fans and have meetings. And so it's going to be probably a long time before it's still if we aren't saying that we're going to see him back with this squad, but it was certainly big news. And one thing we learned also, thanks to Andy Greeter, is he did not get his green card. I had assumed he did if he's coming back, but he did not get his green card. That was the whole point of him going to Argentina. So just add that to the frustration level right now.
Oh, God. What an odd situation.
I think based on the sentiment that you see on Twitter, it would probably be better for him to jump on a plane and go back to Argentina. I don't think that this fan base is going to welcome him back. I mean, I think he could spend the next few weeks cleaning the bathrooms in Allianz Field, and I don't think he's going to gain any further support. I think it's going to be a big struggle for him. And I mean, for me, I've washed my hands of him. I couldn't give a shit if he comes back. And it's just, you can't be bigger than the team. You can't, as Boxall said, it feels like, he doesn't care. And I think that's true. Like, you can't think any other way based on all of the information we have. So I have a feeling there are people who question whether even with him here, he's ever going to see the pitch again for Minnesota. I think it would be in the team's best interest to get rid of him on day one of the transfer window, and move on and find somebody else. The toxicity that I'm sure he's going to end up bringing, whether intended or not, is going to potentially disrupt the team enough to where it's not worth the hassle, I think.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's holding
tough.
the team for a ransom, right? Or
yeah,
hijacking the team.
Yeah, you're right, Edgar. That's what it feels like. And one thing, it was last year was one thing, but we were literally going through the exact same kind of. Now, granted, his situation certainly could be different, but from a fan standpoint, it feels exactly that way. He's showing up when he wants to. He's not, concerned about the team in general. And it is tough, though. You're talking arguably, not arguably, since he came to Minnesota, in 2020, arguably he's been in, one of the best tens in this league. And it's the conversation we love to have. At least this year, we might have talked about him a little too much, but with all these new tactics and formations that we're seeing, we like to discuss. Well, what would we go back to our 4-2-3-1 with Reynoso, or would we continue in the we started out as a 4-3-3 club, in Cameron Knowles' first few games, but then we've shifted to most recently like the 5-4-1. So and how does Reynoso fit into that? Does he fit into that? Would we go back to the 4-2-3-1 with Reynoso? So there's a lot to talk about, a lot to think about. But yeah, it's bottom line, it's a frustrating situation for this club right now, for the fan base, certainly. I'm sure for the club as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the good thing is that you guys are not going to have to deal with him this coming up Wednesday, because Wednesday the 15th, Minnesota receives the LA Galaxy at their house at Allianz Field. Let me give you guys some win probabilities from Google. They have Minnesota with a 45% chance of winning, the draw at 25%, and the LA Galaxy at 30%. In the last 5 head-to-head matches, they are 2-2. Minnesota 2 wins, 2 draws, and the LA Galaxy with 1 win. All right, boys. How does the LA Galaxy go to Allianz Field and maybe pick up a point? Or how does Minnesota slow down this potent LA Galaxy offense?
I think if LA Galaxy wants to beat Minnesota, they exploit the flanks. We have had a tendency, especially since we've shifted, it's saying we continue on this 3 or 5 man back line. We've had a tendency to compact into the middle of the pitch. Atlanta tried multiple times to exploit our flanks, and they succeeded. They just couldn't capitalize on it. So I think that's the key. If we start compacting, we have wide open flanks, and we don't have a lot of talent on the outside. DJ Taylor is fine. He's serviceable. But he's not going to stop a potent attack. Cadell Ford, he's young. He has I think he has a really high ceiling. But right now, I think he would be a bit underwater against the right attack. So I think that's the way LA does this. Is if we come out, you're going to see, and we come out in that 5-man back line, you're going to see us push up high, because we do that on the outsides. And you're going to see the center collapse and compact. The lines are going to get really tight. We like to try to get a nice little offside trap going. We love pushing forward. That's how you do it. You beat us on the outside. Everything should be going. It doesn't matter left or right. Just go to the outside, and I think that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I honestly don't have a lot to add to that. I think David did a great job of the playbook, so to speak. And yeah, I think just that's an excellent point. I love that. Atlanta they had the answer. It just didn't. They couldn't finish. Now, obviously, Atlanta's on a bit of a slide right now. And a lot of that has to do with their finishing, and they couldn't. They had their opportunities, and I guess the only other thing I'd add is, even against Atlanta, Minnesota got off to a hot start, 2-goal lead, and had to kind of hang on more so than we've had to see in the past. And so I think what I'm getting at is, I think if a fast start is critical for the Galaxy as well. I think if they get if Galaxy scores the first goal, I think you'll see those percentages slip immediately. Of course you will, from a win percentage standpoint, but it's meaningful. I think the first goal is going to be big in this game. If Minnesota can get it at home, they're going to be comfortable and confident. Minnesota is they're really hot right now. They're playing well, 3 wins in a row, their last 3. And so I think that first goal is going to be a really big teller. And then, like David said, Minnesota has been caught playing too high, and they can get, if Galaxy can get behind those lines, then yeah, it's gonna. Dane St. Clair has been tremendous as far as saves this year. He's made saves when he needed to, but he has not been busy by any stretch. And it's 2, 3, 4 saves a game. So if LA Galaxy can put 7, 8, 9 shots on target, it's going to test him a little more so than he's been tested, recently, especially. So I think that's the key.
Curious to know if Minnesota will put some kind of substantial pressure on Ricky Puig, because Ricky Puig, like many of the Galaxy players, they like to try to be very technical and try to be very precise with their passing, with their dribbling. And Ricky Puig in particular, he likes to possess the ball a lot and carry it up and down the field. So being able to put a body on him throws him off. Do you think Minnesota will be able to put maybe 1 or 2 guys on him, or like just give him a little shiv here and there and just to knock him to the ground?
I would suspect that will be the case. We have players who are not afraid to play a little hockey, I guess. Boxall, man, I don't know how he even gets away with half the stuff he does. Kervin Arriaga is really good at that. Will Trapp will put a shoulder into you. I think something that I believe is probably in Ramsey's tactics is really trying to create a lot of traffic in the midfield. And so I think you could see some of that, trying to clog the lanes when they're going to try to dribble through it. We're going to end up putting a body, set the tone early, knock them around a little bit. I would suspect it's kind of the Minnesota way, I think.
Well, this upcoming weekend, I know Minnesota is actually pretty good on set pieces, and I think that's one part of the game where you can get the LA Galaxy. I know they've been doing better on set pieces, but we've still conceded 8+ goals on set pieces, and it's something that 12 even more.
Wow.
So coming into Allianz Field, you're the away team. The LA Galaxy just played this weekend. You guys have had a week and a half of rest. I think that's going to be a key factor in what's going to go down in this match, especially if you guys could get us early on those set pieces. So I'm not really sure if this game is going to go in our favor. But I'm going to throw it to you guys. You guys have a bold prediction for this Wednesday's match?
Well, I mean, you teed me up there. You teed me up there, and I don't even know if it's bold, but I guess because great point, and I didn't to be forward, I didn't realize that the LA Galaxy was struggling with set pieces, but yeah, it's one thing we haven't seen in a while here. But actually, Minnesota has scored a goal on a set piece in their last 3 matches, and they've also been very well defending that. So I guess I wouldn't be surprised to see that streak continue into 4 games, especially at home. And that's excellent point, Brian, because that might be how this team beats the Galaxy if they do. And if they get that first goal off a set piece that just goes, playing at home in front of the crowd, which, it's a Wednesday afternoon, but I would expect it, or Wednesday evening, but I would expect it to be a relatively full stadium. So it's going to get loud early. So yeah, I wouldn't call that bold, but like I said, you teed me up. I couldn't resist. So I don't know if David, you have any other opinions, but
bold score prediction.
Yeah, you didn't give a score prediction.
Score prediction. Yeah, I said this last night on our podcast got released just this afternoon, actually. So nobody would have had a chance to listen to it by now. But I went with 3-2, which is actually a bit of a higher score. I mean, Minnesota has scored 3 goals in the game a few times, 2 times I think this season, but it's a high score. I mean, the 1-0, 2-1 wins have been commonplace for this team, but I see 3-2 only because I think, I kind of I've penciled in Galaxy for a couple of goals as well, exploiting the high lines and getting behind and scoring. And so, yeah, 3-2. I guess that's my prediction. It's a very Homer biased opinion, but 3-2 Loons. So.
Yeah, it's interesting that set pieces are a thing for us. A lot of people may not know that Eric Ramsey was the set piece specialist at Manchester United. So shocking that maybe that might have played into our success lately. I think we have a tendency to get out and get moving. I believe, right? You guys had to come back to tie against RSL, which might play into our favor a bit. I'm still really worried about our flanks. I think I've argued it. We go against the right team, and they're going to beat us. I'm not optimistic like Dave. I never am optimistic like Dave. So I don't think we're going to lose. But I think I'm going with 2-2. I think you guys are going to have another 2-2 on your hands. Yeah.
You know what's interesting, and you mentioned the fact that the Loons are coming off, essentially a bye week. I struggle because Minnesota now has a match on Wednesday and Saturday, like I suppose most clubs in the league. But the last time Minnesota came off a bye, they had beat LAFC at home. I think it was back in March, but they had their first early bye week at that point, and then they came out. Now they had to travel to a tough Philadelphia club, but they were completely flat. Easily the worst game of the year for Minnesota United coming off a bye. So that if you guys are looking for maybe a glimmer of hope or for a strong performance, then that might be it. That coming off a bye, regardless, Minnesota hadn't looked good at least earlier in the season. So we'll see what happens this time.
Edgar, same thing to you. We're going to Allianz Field. The LA Galaxy on short week of rest. They're rested. They get to exploit us on the set pieces. We can exploit them on the wings. How do you think it's going to go this Wednesday?
Well, we have two tough road matches against Minnesota and Charlotte, who's very good at home. But first off, Minnesota. I don't know how Reynoso's return is going to impact the locker room. I guess atmosphere, if it's going to affect people in a very negative fashion. It seems like the club has found its groove, and yeah, you guys mentioned he's not going to see the field in this match. He might not see the field at all before the transfer window, but just having him come back, man, when things are going so well for you, that you can't ignore that, right? It's like dropping a rock into a pond. It's going to create some ripples. So I'm hoping, I'm hoping that it affects the Minnesota locker room in one way where everybody's like upset, and maybe Galaxy can, get some points on the road. But I am also pretty, I'm kind of conservative when it comes to these things as well. So I'm hoping, and I'm being as positive as possible. I'm hoping for a 2-2 draw, because I don't know if Galaxy will be able to come off this emotional draw against RSL and then be able to quickly turn around, head on the road, and be able to pull something off against Minnesota. So 2-2 draws for me, right?
Because we do have two matches in a short week, I'm not sure what the starting lineup is going to be with the LA Galaxy. You can't run your 3DPs to the ground playing a match midweek at Allianz Field. And let's be fair, Minnesota has been really good, so it's going to be really tough for the LA Galaxy to go up there and try to steal some points. I know both teams have their deficiencies on both ends, but because of the short week and because you got to rest players for the Saturday match, I'm gonna take an L on this one. I say 2-1. It's gonna be tight, but a 2-1 loss for the LA Galaxy seems more than fair. I don't know if we get scored on 3 times, but I'll give it a 2-1, and that's being nice because it could really get ugly in a midweek match like that. All right, boys, we are at the tail end of our show. Is there anything you guys want to add on before we get up out of here?
I'm not, for me personally. No, I don't think so. It's been fun previewing a match like that and talking about Minnesota soccer history. That's been fun.
Yeah, this has been awesome. Do you guys want to plug in your socials before we get out of here?
Yeah, so you can. We're mostly only active on Twitter. So it's Loonacy P on Twitter, Loonacy Podcast on pretty much anywhere you look for streaming podcasts. Yeah, that's where you can find us.
Perfect. Edgar, do you want to plug in your socials before we get out of here?
No, but first of all, I just want to say thank you guys so much, the Daves, for joining us from Minnesota all the way down to Florida. The Daves. But it's wonderful learning about all the different clubs across the league, and this is just another chapter, and and the beautiful story of our sport here in the United States. But if you guys want to find me on Twitter, Edgar Nags, NA_GS. Also on Instagram, Edgar Nags. I interview people after the game sometimes, and I got a whole bunch of them this last game against RSL. Everybody was going nuts after that game.
Yeah.
But Bryant, where can we find you, man?
You guys can find me as Bryant Nags on Twitter and on Instagram. Of course, I want to thank you guys for coming on again. You guys are welcome to come back if we ever get to play each other again.
For sure.
You guys are more than welcome. And
sorry to step on you there, but you'd be more than welcome to come on the Loonacy P anytime too. Sure. So
Sweet.
Yeah, appreciate it.
You already know. Well, that does it for us here at News Across the Galaxy. We want to thank our guests once again for coming on and shooting the shit with us. And that does it from me, Bryant, Edgar, David, Dave. We're gonna get up out of here, and as always, keep on nagging.
Wu-Tang for life.